College rankings like the one from US News and World Report are horrible. They've been plagued with every sort of scandal imaginable. They openly use absurd metrics to rank schools, and they don't even have the data they claim to use. You will not believe what goes into a ranking. But what really makes them so bad, and why do we still look at them? In this video, I'm going to uncover the truth behind college rankings. I'll talk about what goes into a ranking and why I spent a month researching and analyzing data despite getting increasingly frustrated with the secrecy and just bad math. More importantly, I'm going to build a better ranking system and show you which colleges are better or worse than you think they are. We'll see where your school should be ranked, and while some of the results are expected, some are gonna shock you. But first, where did all this come from? US News and World Report is privately owned by a billionaire whose name is actually Mortimer. Mort is an overachiever who went to 2 different Ivy League schools, Harvard and UPenn. He owns one of the largest real estate investment trusts in the country, and he also owns US News and World Report. They published their first ranking of national universities in 1983. Today, they don't report much US or world news. They mostly just publish rankings. Because of course, Americans love comparing ourselves to other people. They have many best colleges lists. They also rank best countries, best cities, best nursing homes, you name it, they rank it. I'll be focusing on their list of top national universities. There's some other history you should know, like where the SAT comes from, and we'll talk more about that company later. For now, just know that they are very controversial. To rank colleges, US News uses these detailed categories, which I'll summarize into these broader categories. There are a lot of metrics that US News uses to rank colleges that I don't have an issue with. The first is outcomes. Though this category is extremely controversial because some of the changes they've made this year, I'm not messing with it too much. The criticism comes from new social mobility metrics. These scores only impact a minority of students, but have a big impact on the final ranking. But whether they should or shouldn't be included isn't really for me to decide. It's part of a broader conversation we're having as a nation. So for now, I'm leaving it in. If you don't like that, you can look at my final ranking to see how things would change if they were removed. I also don't have an issue with including borrower debt. The more debt you leave school with, the worse. Not surprisingly, mid-tier private universities do worse in this category. State schools, on the other hand, do really well. And so do schools known as having a wealthy student body. I was 17 years old when I started college. At that age, I had no idea what a student loan was. Debt isn't always a bad thing, but in this case, less is clearly better. I agree with US News on including this category. Comparison to high school grads. I love this category. It measures the percentage of students who make more money than someone who didn't go to college. So I'll keep this in my ranking, along with student-faculty ratio. Research shows that this really matters. And finally, financial resources. This is how much money the school spends per student. And I'll call this the richness score later. But there is good data that shows that increased spending per student improves student outcomes. Now look, the work that goes into their ranking is very impressive. The team at US News is clearly much better at data science than I am, but their common sense is bad. A ranking like this needs to be both a science and an art, and there is no art, logic, or reason that goes into this thing. And with that, I have some serious issues with their system. This makes me angry, and it might do the same to you, so whatever you do, don't rage smash anything. But do gently tap that like button. My first issue is with peer assessment. This is 20% of a school's score, and if all I did was remove this entirely, this ranking would be 20% better. To get this, they simply ask college presidents and other important people to rank other schools from 1 to 5. US News says this category matters because it factors things that cannot easily be captured elsewhere. That's bullshit. Surveys are not reliable. All this does is make sure that an Ivy League school wins every year, and it helps prevent things from changing too much from year to year. Not only that, but most people don't respond to the survey. So how could that possibly make up a fifth of the score? My next issue is with standardized tests. 5% of the score comes from the incoming students' SAT scores. If this were a national ranking of high schools, that might make sense. But universities don't impact the SAT scores of their incoming students. Plus, colleges are increasingly removing standardized tests from the admissions process. This is because SAT scores don't correlate with future success in college or in the job market. The moment you get into college, sometime sooner, your SAT scores don't matter anymore. What's more, the SAT is administered by a nonprofit called Educational Testing Services, or ETS. Because they're a nonprofit, they get quite a tax break on their 376-acre campus in the extremely wealthy town of, you guessed it, Princeton, New Jersey. It's just a few miles from Princeton University. The school US News has ranked #1 for the last 13 years in a row. ETS essentially functions as a monopoly, exempt from all sorts of taxes and federal reporting. To do their controversies justice, I'd need to make an entire video on them alone. But here's just one more thing. Some colleges don't report SAT data because they don't have it. For those schools, US News just adds that 5% weight onto the graduation rate, and graduation rate is my next issue. This is part of the outcomes bucket, and I said earlier that I don't have an issue factoring in outcomes. What I do have an issue with is giving so much weight to this category. An engineering degree from MIT and an art history degree from some unaccredited university are different, and graduation isn't the only outcome students should expect. Job placement, future earnings, and alumni network all matter a lot. Graduation is a big deal, but I'm reducing the weight significantly. My next issue is faculty salaries. There is some good research that shows student outcomes improve when professors make more money. But how does US News get faculty salary data? They don't. They will use data directly from a school in the rare event that they just hand it over. In every other case, they use some murky data that's over 3 years old, and this category makes up 6% of a school's score. This is true for so many of these categories. The data just doesn't exist, but US News doesn't say much about that, do they? Ugh. Here's a bunch of things I don't like. Full-time faculty. Many of the best professors I had in college were part-time faculty. The rest of their time was spent doing the job that they were training us for. US News admits that this time doing the job is crucial for doctors. So why would it be different for any other profession? Does it make sense to punish a school for doing this? No, I am not including this in my ranking. Graduation rate performance. These bizarre calculations attempt to measure if a school graduates students at a higher rate than expected. This just doesn't matter to any individual student. First generation graduation rate. I love the idea of this. They're trying to determine if first generation students graduate at higher or lower rates than everyone else. But the way they determine who's first generation is bad. My next issue is faculty research. And this is actually kind of interesting. US News admits that research is more applicable to graduate students, but says that undergrads can benefit as well. I agree, and I experienced this myself. It's just a small percentage of the ranking, so I don't have an issue with that. What I do have an issue with is Elsevier, the company that provides the data for this category. They've been accused of publishing fake scientific journals, rent-seeking, deceptive copyright practices, plagiarism, racism, and the list goes on. Their Wikipedia is mostly about how horrible they are. They have published a number of articles saying that college rankings are flawed and are more influential than they should be. But if you thought ETS was bad, these guys are worse. And yes, they are mostly guys. Because they're a public company, we know that their UK workforce has the highest gender pay gap of any publisher in the region. The company said that's because there are more men than women in senior roles and more women than men in lower paid roles. No shit. Impressive analysis from a scientific and technical publishing company. These people suck. Plus, this data is somehow proprietary and access is restricted, so I'm not including it. That's all really bad, but there is a silver lining. Removing all that garbage gives us plenty of room to address my last issue. There are some glaring omissions. One of my biggest issues with this list isn't the obviously horrible things that they include, it's the categories that they don't even consider. The idea that academics are the only thing that matters is absurd. There are many other factors that influence how effective a college is in preparing an 18-year-old for the real world, and how enjoyable that place is for 4 years. I've never seen any of these big ranking systems consider the question, will you have a good time at college? There's a bunch of things missing here, and I'll talk about them next. When I came up with the idea for this, it was supposed to end here, but exposing the BS behind college rankings isn't the most interesting part of this video. So I spent the past month building my own ranking system to see how these universities should be ranked. Here's how I did it. And again, if you're gonna hit the subscribe button, please do so gently. There are a few ways you could build a college ranking system. You could try to measure the total good that a college does. For example, Harvard could probably do a lot more total good if they didn't keep their enrollment artificially low. You could also look at expected versus actual performance. I'm not going to get into it because this doesn't matter to any individual student, which leads us to the third way to rank colleges. How much good does it do for any individual student? This looks at a college through the lens of a student considering that college. This type of system should factor in everything that matters to that student. This is how most people look at these lists, so it's how I'll build my ranking as well. If you want me to build something different, let me know in the comments below. And the final way to build a ranking system is some sort of weird hybrid of all three, like the one from US News and World Report. In the tech world, we'd call this feature creep, a disruptible incumbent, or just bad. It does too much and nothing at the same time. Here's how I built a better ranking system. There's one section that I kept, but modified a lot. The outcomes section. Again, graduation is important, but checking that box shouldn't be 50% of the score. I dropped the category overall to 20%, removed the weird performance metrics, and took out the first generation metrics because the data just isn't reliable. There are a handful of things that I kept in the ranking more or less unchanged. Good job, US News, but I'm going to focus on the main categories that I added. First up, earning more than a high schooler 10 years out. In theory, this is what college is all about. Are you putting yourself on a trajectory to earn more money than if you hadn't gone to college in the first place? This metric is the percentage of students who are earning more than someone who only went to high school 10 years after starting college. Weird, but important. Rewind that if you want. This category answers the question, are you earning more? The next categories will handle how much more. Mean earnings 10 years out. On average, how much money do grads make 10 years after they started college? Median earnings 10 years out. Median earnings helps account for outliers on both ends of the spectrum. How US News ignores earnings completely is beyond me. I would expect them to start including this metric in the near future. Other ratings like the one from the Wall Street Journal do include a lot of this, so maybe US News just needs a differentiator? Who knows? Next up, male to female ratio. Diversity matters. Trust me. For this, I'm measuring gender imbalance in either direction. And there's no good data on anything other than male or female, so I can't include anything else. Socioeconomic ratio. I went to a college with mostly rich white people. I don't regret it, but it was weird at times. Again, diversity matters. Trust me. Acceptance rate. There is an issue with including this. Many elite colleges function more like nightclubs than institutions of higher learning. Just like the line outside of the club, colleges keep enrollment low to make it look more enticing. Still, this is a good way to measure if students really want to go there. US News removed this year. Student life. There's really only one good ranking of this, and I borrowed their data for my ranking. It includes factors like the party scene, athletics, university food and housing, the local area, and what students actually think about their college. I think it's borderline criminal for a ranking system to leave student life out. If you're spending 4 years at a place, that might matter more than anything else, especially considering those years are from roughly 18 to 22. I'm adding this to my ranking and giving it a 20% weight. Now let's talk about data for a sec. US News says they'll share their data for research purposes. You just have to email Robert Morse, their chief data strategist. I did this a few times and he opened the emails, but I never heard back. I did my best to use the same data sources and calculations, but they're not super clear on any of this. Anyway, here's how my ranking system breaks down. Outcomes, 20%. This is looking at graduation rates. Earnings, 30%. The focus here is on earning potential and actual earnings. Student experience, 30%. The category that's suspiciously absent from so many rankings. Academics, 20%. This is sort of a catch-all category, and here's a more detailed look at the factors. Feel free to rewind the video if you want to take a closer look. After diving deep on how these scores are calculated, it's obvious these rankings don't have much bearing on how good these universities actually are. Now's a good time to briefly mention why people look at these things. For prospective students, college is extremely expensive, and there aren't a lot of good ways to determine how to best spend your money. If you're going to college, of course you want to go to the best college you got into. I've got no problem with that. I did it myself. Just know that US News isn't really telling you what's best. For parents, this is just about validation. You've seen Harvard mom stickers on Volvos before, or Stanford dad stickers on Teslas. For alumni, college brand might get you a better job a year or two after graduation, but it's really just about feeling special. The only purpose is comparing yourself to people you meet later. My college was in the low 30s when I went there. Now it's around 50. And I know that doesn't mean anything, but I still don't like it. And schools might use rankings to get you to donate, but don't let them trick you. One more absurd aspect of the US News ranking is that they love to say schools are tied. Maybe that's because they aren't that confident in their results. Either way, I don't like ties. There's only room for one best university on my list, so you should be expecting some differences here. And that's what we found. Enough of that, let's see the results. First up, the biggest surprises. Number one is the UC system. California operates some incredible public universities, and while many are ranked very highly on my list, most are ranked higher by US News. Surprise two, Lehigh University. Full disclosure, this is where I went to college, and I'm only really including it for transparency. I did mention I'm a bit salty about the US News ranking, so I'm happy to see Lehigh get a modest bump here. This was mostly driven by the high proportion of engineering students. And surprise three, a lot stayed the same. There are some shocking results, but there are some expected ones as well. Up next, the biggest losers. Number one, Princeton and Dartmouth. These Ivy League schools had a really disappointing showing. Princeton fell 6 places to number 7, very far from their 13-year winning streak. Dartmouth isn't even in the top 30. Now let me be clear. Both of these schools are excellent. If you get into either one, you should probably go there. There was no one category that was the downfall for either one of these schools. There's just a lot of really good colleges up there, and they don't quite compare. Loser number 2 is Penn State. The Nittany Lions fell from 60 in the US News ranking to 125 in mine. That is the biggest drop for any of the top 100 schools. And loser 3 is US News and World Report. I don't think there's any explanation necessary here. The biggest winners. Number 1, Rice. USC, Georgetown, Boston College, NYU, and Tufts. They all had substantial moves into the top 30 or further up into the top 30. Here's a quick look at those top 30 schools. Again, feel free to rewind. And the last winner is you. Hopefully you're learning something interesting. I'll get to the top 3 in a second, but first, something I'd like to see from US News is a certainty score. US News is using very incomplete data to provide this ranking, and some acknowledgement of that would be nice. They do provide some info on their data and methodologies, actually quite a bit. And I get it, they don't publish this ranking to help students, they're doing it to make money for more. But a lot of people really care about this ranking, more than they should. So a bit more honesty and transparency would be nice. They're also using some 3-year-old data to provide a score for next year. What the heck? I started this video by saying college rankings are horrible. That's true of US News. It's probably true of mine, though I do think mine is better. It's certainly more honest. I chose my alma mater based on my major, the size of the school, and the distance from home. And I made the right choice. My sister chose her school based on academics and how much fun football games are. And she made the right choice too. Don't choose a college based solely on what's highest on some list. Choose a college based on the factors that matter the most to you. And let me know in the comments if there's anything I missed. And finally, the top 3 schools. Number 3 is the University of Pennsylvania, also known as UPenn. That's 3 places better than the US News ranking. Number 2 is Stanford University. That compares to number 3 on the US News ranking. And number 1, by the narrowest of margins, is MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, up 1 spot from the US News list. If you made it to this point in the video, I know you'll like this one too. And if you want to see more like this, hit subscribe and let me know down below.
5 figures this week, no show yet.